everyone, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we have my August stats and wrap up. So this is a little bit later than I would usually put a video like this out. However, my computer died and had things wrong with it near the end of last month, and it took over a week to get stuff sort of figured out. And so that pushed back 2 vlogs that I released recently, and I wanted to make sure I got those out so you guys could see some of the stuff that I was reading and like my major thoughts on it before we went to the wrap up, and you saw my quicker thoughts on it. So we are going to be jumping into the stats and then getting into everything that I read in the month of August. I will say right now, we're back on track. Last month in July was really slow. I only read like 2 books total. For the month of August, I actually read 11 books. So definitely getting back to where I would normally be. It's not like my best reading month, but it is much better than 2. You know what I mean? If we go and look at the page numbers that I read 3,304. So again, definitely getting better. My bare minimum for page number is like 2,000 per month. So the fact that I was over 3,000 is actually really good. I'm so happy with that. Going down to the hours that I listened for the month, though, I'm at 4.3. I did listen to, I think, 2 audiobooks. We'll get into that as well. But they were really short audiobooks compared with everything that I was reading in the month. And I read a lot more like physical books. So this is one of the lower numbers. Again, not the lowest, but quite low. So I think those are all the things that we compare every single month. So now we're going to get into like the actual stats for everything that I read during the month, starting with the reading method. So like I mentioned, I did have 2 audiobooks. I also read 1 book as an ebook and 8 books as physical reads. Like I said, a lot of the things that I read this month were actual physical books. For the genre, I had 3 fantasy, 3 sci-fi, 2 romance, 1 paranormal, 1 mystery, and 1 contemporary. That's a pretty good mix. And as for the book format, one of the things I read was a graphic novel, whereas the rest were novels. As for indie or traditional, everything was traditionally published this month. And for how I got it, I did borrow 6 of those books from the library. 2 of them are ones that I owned prior to this year. 2 of them are ones that I bought this year. So those 4 books would be coming off of like my physical TBR technically. And then 1 was an ARC. That would have been the ebook version as well. Moving into the age category. So this one, again, is a little different than normal. I had 6 middle grade books. I've been reading some really good middle grade this year, and so I did focus on that this month. One of the vlogs that I mentioned before was actually reading a bunch of middle grade books because they were up for an award from Barnes & Noble. So that's why I have 6 of them here. I then did also read 1 young adult book and 4 adult titles. Moving down to the publication year. This is something that I'm tracking this year. I've tracked it in the past, but the only categories that I have this year are like books that released in 2025, 2024, 2023. Everything else after that is considered backlist for me or classics. This month, I read 6 titles released in 2025, 3 released in 2024, and 1 released in 2023. This is very different. Lately, I've been reading a ton of backlists. Like my biggest category, which has the most years as well, obviously, but my biggest category is backlist for the entire year because I have a ton of things that are older than just the last like 3 years. Everything that I read in August, though, has been released within the last 3 years, with my highest number being in 2025. And then the last thing that we're tracking before we get into the star ratings is another new one this year. I'm tracking where the author is from. So for this month in August, I have 6 authors from the United States, 1 from Japan, 1 from England, 1 from India, 1 from Canada, and 1 from Australia. I'm only tracking this per author once. So like my stats for the entire year will be slightly different than like how many books I've read for the entire year, because even if I read an author more than once, I'm only tracking this once. This is for every single author that I read in August. So this is actually pretty good. I like that I'm reading from a variety of different countries, although publishing is huge in the United States. So of course, a lot of the books that I read are from authors from the United States. And then I think that is actually it until we get to the star rating. So for this month, my average was 4.09 or 4.1. That's actually pretty good. I feel like I had a pretty good reading month because my lowest rating that I have here is a 3. Would I like more books to be above a 3? Yes, of course, but 3 is just like okay for me. So the fact that my lowest rating is a 3 is great. That means I didn't like actively dislike anything. So I did have 1 3-star, 2 3.5 stars, 4 4-stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5-star reads. Like overall, pretty darn good reading month. And I'm so glad it was because of the fact that, like I said, July was not that great. I only read a couple things. So the fact that I was able to read 11 books and have a pretty average, like 4-star rating is amazing. So now we are going to get into the books that I read during the month. We're going to start with that 3-star and then move up to my favorite book of the month. Okay, and so my 3-star read was The House at the Edge of Magic by Amy Sparks. This is one of the books that is middle grade that I mentioned in that vlog earlier. And so if you do want to hear any of my thoughts for that kind of thing, I will leave the vlog linked down below for you. But basically this was a very, very short middle grade, less than 300 pages, very wide margins, bigger font, about a girl who is an orphan, street urchin type of thing. She likes to steal things and she steals this house trinket that's very, very small. And I think she like knocks on the door knocker and then it ends up turning into this huge house that takes up a whole alleyway. It's really tall and weird looking, that only she can see. And it has this magician in there and they're like under a curse and she has to try and break it. My biggest thing with this is I think it was just way too quick. Again, it was very short book, very big font, very big margins. And so while it was 200 something pages, it took me like an hour, less than an hour and a half to read, like an hour and a bit to read this book. And it just felt like there needed to be more. Like the reason for the curse wasn't a good enough reason in my opinion. It was just one of those things where I was really wishing for more from it because everything just sped through very, very quickly. I do think it'd probably be a good starter middle grade. Like it's very young middle grade, obviously. And I was just wanting more from it. It is the first book in a series. Maybe the series gets better, but yeah. Then we're going to be moving into the 3.5 stars. The first one I have here is Afia in the Land of Wonders by Mia Arujo. This one, I wanted to like it more than I actually did. Again, this is part of the middle grade vlog, and this is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, where they're basically set in this like fictionalized Africa. The author is Argentinian American, and so it did rub me a little bit the wrong way with the fact that it felt like every single character in this book was Black from some sort of fictionalized country in Africa, but at the same time, that didn't make a difference in the actual characters and the voice of everything. Like it could have been set in a completely different country and would not have changed the story in any way, in my opinion. So that just felt performative in a way. Also, the character in this book that is our main character of Afia, she turns 16 pretty early on in the story, so it felt like it should have been a young adult versus a middle grade, but the actual way the writing was, the content of the story, it just felt young. So I do understand why they had it as middle grade. I would have wished, especially since our main character was 16, for it to be aged up a little bit to make it young adult. I did like the actual Alice in Wonderland aspects. I do think those things played out in a good enough way. It was different from Alice in Wonderland, but you could see where those things came from the original story. But everything else was just like, okay. My next 3.5 star is from a different vlog. So this was a vlog where I had Spotify / my music taste pick my TBR, and then I read them in the vlog, and it was The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. So this is a very witchy story. We have 3 different characters here. One is cursed. One is trying to resurrect her sister who died about a year ago, and the other one is a curse rider who helps women have magic, because this is a world where only women are allowed to have magic, men can't. And it was quite dark at places, which I did enjoy. However, it was also very slow. It took a while for the characters to meet up to like really advance the plot. The ending was a little bit fast. Like, it wasn't necessarily like a twist or anything. There was some reveals in there, things that I saw coming, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But just like for my overall experience with this, I don't think personally it's my kind of story. Like, I was fine with it, which is why I gave it a 3.5. It is young adult, and I do think the way that the things were written, even though some parts were a little bit more gruesome, the young adult age grouping fits for that. I do think it was content appropriate for a young adult audience. I just don't necessarily think it was my thing. I wished for a little bit more from it, and yeah. Okay, moving into my 4-star reads. The first one I have here is The Other Side of Tomorrow by Tina Cho. This was the graphic novel that I read, again, part of the middle grade vlog. This one has a very simple prose style for the way the story is told. It is about 2 young kids escaping North Korea. And so this is a fictionalized story, but obviously based on things that are real life. And again, it was just one of those things where I don't think the way the story was written was 100% my thing, which took it down about a star in my point of view. However, the content of the story is very much like hard-hitting real life sort of things. I did cry at this one, so I do think it did some things very well, and then other things for me personally not as well. It was just very, very simple sentences that sometimes just didn't feel quite right that way. But again, very hard-hitting. I think a very important story. 4 stars. The next 4-star I have here is another middle grade. It is Away by Megan E. Freeman. Again, part of that middle grade vlog again. This was a very quick read. I did listen to this on audio, and it had a ton of different narrators, and it actually had a bunch of different like actual voice narrators for the different characters' point of views. I really did like the audio book of this because it had so many distinct points of view that way. This is more dystopian sort of thing where a bunch of kids end up having to be evacuated from Colorado. And when I say kids, I mean their families as well, but we follow the kids. Evacuated from Colorado. We don't really know what's going on. This is a companion to another book by Megan E. Freeman, which they overlap a little bit. Like, there's little cameo name drop type of things, and the overall concept of the stories, this is like 2 different points of view of the same conflict type of thing. And so even though I hadn't read the first book, I don't think you have to in order to read this one. But this story takes place over 2 years, like 2.5 years, something like that. And it's only like a 2-hour audiobook, really. So it was very, very quick moving. And I do think, again, I was wishing for more from it that way because it was so quick moving over so long of a period of time. I didn't feel as invested as I should have. I will say near the end of the book, I was much more invested, and I really liked the stuff that it talked about in here, and I can't really get into it because of like spoilers, things like that. So I do think it was good. I just was wishing for a little bit more. So again, I couldn't give it a full 5-star, but I did like the narrators. One of the characters is also like really into film and stuff, and so I'm pretty sure his points of view were like written like a script based on the way that the words were. Another character is a journalist. I don't think hers were written with a script in mind, but I liked all the different points of view that we did have. All the different characters felt very distinct from each other, which was great. So yeah, I would probably read more from this author. It was just, I wanted a little bit more from it. The next 4-star I have here is again from the music vlog, and that is going to be This Spells Love by Kate Robb. This is a like slightly magical romance where our main female character has like a really bad breakup and wants to cleanse her love life, cleanse this guy from her life. And so her older sister, her aunt, and her best friend Dax do this spell. But the thing is, she wakes up in this alternate reality and She has no longer had this relationship with her ex, which is great, but her best friend Dax also does not know who she is because apparently she met him the same day she met her ex. So we go through that whole sort of thing. If you really like the 13 going on 30, that kind of stuff, I do think this did pretty well with that. Again, I was wishing for a little bit more, specifically in the ending of this one. We have a lot of like the good middle parts of the story, the like relationship building, that kind of stuff. But then we only got like 20 pages to like wrap up the end when I would have really have liked to see more of the, you know, it's a romance, happily ever after, that kind of thing. I would have liked a little bit more of that. And then I will mention this does have one Harry Potter name drop in here that I did not think we needed in any way, especially since this book was published in 2023. So that knocked it down a little bit for me as well. Then my last 4-star that I have here was my first book of the month that I read in like one day pretty much, Strange Houses by Uketsu. So I read Strange Pictures earlier this year, really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. I'm also giving this one 4 stars. I really love this concept of the story, but then we have like the different illustrations and houses and things like that in here. Like we really get a visual medium with these books, which I love. This one had that sort of mystery aspect. I did feel like there wasn't as much us trying to figure stuff out. Like the first one, Strange Pictures, had 4 sort of like smaller stories, and we really got to like, why do we think this is going on, as well as like the people actually telling us, right? This one, I feel like I had a guess, but it's more like one big story, which is not a bad thing. But because of that, there was a little bit less of like feeling like I was figuring things out at the same time as the characters. It was more them presenting their findings, which was fine. And it is a very weird, mysterious type of thing going on with the houses. Again, I gave it a 4-star because I do feel like there could be a little bit more for it. I also feel like in both stories there is a little bit of like an ableism aspect, which I can't get into because of the way that the stories are told. And I just do feel like it is that like slightly, like they don't mean to say things in a certain way, and I can't tell if it's the translation or the fact that these were written in Japanese first, but there is a little bit of that in there. Just keep that in mind. Things that I'm like, I understand where it came from, especially with the plot point, but at the same time, I would have wished it not been like that. It happens. So yeah, that's why it's a 4-star. I did really like this one. I'm very curious. I think there's another one coming out soon, which is called like Strange Buildings, something like that. I want to see where all this stuff is going to go. I really like the mystery, slightly horror aspect of these. So yeah. Then we're moving into my 4.5 stars. The first one I have here is another middle grade from the middle grade vlog. Yes. Vanya and the Wild Hunt by Sangu Mandana. So this one is like the first book in a magical school type of series. I'm very, very curious to see where it's going to go from here because I did like this one. I just felt it was a little bit slow in some parts. So basically we have our main character of Vanya, who sort of knows magic is a thing because she can talk to like old special types of books. But then after stuff happens, she ends up having to go to a magical school that she did not realize existed. And she spends a lot of that like beginning time talking about the grounds of the school, the towers of the school, the library of the school, and I wanted more of her actual experience and not her describing things. We also have some friends that show up in here for her to make friends with, and again, I feel like we could have had more time building those friendships. Like I felt like they were a little bit secondary to everything else that was going on. So like things that I would like to see from a middle grade magical school book, I just wished to see a little bit more. I did like a lot of the rest of the story. It was a very quick read, obviously. I liked her family aspects. I liked the magical world. Apparently there's like these magical old gods type of things in there. And so this is Vanya and the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is one of those types. I wish we got that a little bit more like we did, but I feel like this was a setup for more in the series versus like a really good book one. Like, it was good, but I wanted more. I will say this book has a lot of great representation. Vanya is ADHD. One of her friends has autism. She obviously is Indian, and we also have other characters that are other ethnicities as well. Like, one of the side characters, they mention her speaking Cantonese. I also really liked that we had LGBTQ representation here as well. Obviously, Vanya's like 11. We're not really getting her in any of those identities right now, which completely makes sense, but we do have like family friends that she ends up going and living with at the school who are gay and married and things like that. And I just really liked having those aspects in the story. They're not like huge, but I love that they were included, especially because I do think the way that they describe Vanya's ADHD was really well done. Like, they talk about like her having to, not exactly, they didn't say masking or anything, but like her having to feel like she's putting on a personality to try and make herself palatable for other people. And I just really, really liked the way that they delved into that kind of stuff. So yeah. And then the other 4.5 star that I have is Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. This is a book that came out in August. I literally pre-ordered it. The day it came in, I picked it up. I actually read this in the middle of my middle grade vlog because I needed some break in between all the middle grade stuff, and I gave it 4.5 stars. This is a cozy sci-fi about robots wanting to start a noodle shop. And it is. However, I will say I thought it could have been cozier because they're doing this after war happened. Basically, they live in California, and California is now like its own sovereign nation apart from the United States. And these robots, like one of them specifically used to be like a war robot who sort of has PTSD. And so they kept, for the beginning of the story, kept bringing up war and things that happened after the war. And like, they just kept mentioning it. And so for me personally, with this being billed as a cozy sci-fi, and that's what I wanted, and I wanted more of them and the noodle shop, and like that part was amazing. I just thought that the fact that we kept mentioning this sort of war aspect was not as cozy as it could have been. That's the reason it's a 4.5. I really did like this one. It is a novella. It's very, very quick to read. Just keep that in mind because I went into this not realizing that they were going to mention that at all versus how much it actually shows up. So I will say it is cozy sci-fi, but I don't think it's as cozy as some people might be wanting. Keep it in mind. And now we are moving into the 5-star reads that I have. I have 2 of them. So the first one is The Flicker by H.E. Edgman. Again, part of the middle grade vlog. This is a dystopian where the sun flickered and apparently got like really hot or something. It sent it out to the earth, burned a lot of things down, lots of people are dead. This is very much for like an older middle grade audience. It has a lot of hard topics. I really liked the way it was dealt with. They talk a lot about like climate change and things like that obviously as well, but like it opens up with our main characters burying one of their dads because he has died. Like that is the opening scene of this book. So it is definitely like older middle grade, but I think it did what it did very, very well. It starts off a little bit slow. They do have to do some surviving. They find some other kids as well, and I really liked the way that that sort of stuff was talked about. One of the other side characters is trans and is like out, but we also talk about like questioning and figuring out who you are and things like that. And then the last third of the story I think really picked up its pace, did a lot of things that I really wanted it to do. So I really liked it. I cried. I gave it 5 stars. And then the last one that I have here is again part of the music vlog. It's Well Actually by Maisie Eddings. I absolutely loved this one. So this, I was so happy got a 5-star because The Plus One by Maisie Eddings is one of my favorites. The year it came out, it was like one of my top books, but then I tried Late Bloomer last year and I didn't like it as much. And I think I've discovered that part of the reason is that both The Plus One and Well Actually have that sort of romance, almost rom-com nature, but it also deals with really tough mental health type of topics. And so I really, really liked it. So this one here follows Eva, who is a podcast host. She wants to be more of like a normal journalist, but is obviously more on this like funny haha type of podcast sort of thing. She's very dry, very sarcastic, has lots of like things going on where like she's sort of a mess. I personally loved her so much. And she calls out this other guy who's not in a podcast situation. I think he's more of like TikTok type of things. Like he does videos and things like that, for basically going out with her a few times in college. And then they had sex and then he ghosted her. And she's like, this is not the guy to look up to, because he's basically trying to tell people how to be good guys and things like that with dating. And she's like, do not do what he's doing. He was a horrible person back then. And so he wants to make it up to her, go on dates with her, and like prove that he's changed. And I absolutely love this one so much. I really love the fact that they delved into some harder topics. I cried for like 30 minutes near the middle of the story, and I just really loved their character dynamic. I really loved her and how dry and sarcastic and like crazy she was. Like that was one of my favorite parts. And so yeah, I just really liked it. I can see maybe why some people would be like, I don't know about this one, because like if you don't like how dry and like sort of like self-depreciating Eva is sometimes, I don't know if you would like it as much, but I did. Like I said, I cried for a while. And I read this within like 2 sittings because I just like could not put it down. So 100% my favorite book of the month. And like I said, I am so happy that like this got me out of that reading slump. I started with the middle grade books, obviously, because I was like, you know what, I think some fun middle grade will get me out. But I also really like doing that music picks my TBR. And I will say I liked it so much that I didn't care that I can't be monetized for it, because obviously we used some music clips in that vlog. But I really liked stepping out of the box and like finding books to read off my shelves, obviously, but like in a weird and different way. Like that was so much fun. I definitely think that helped with that reading slump. And so that is everything. Let me know what your favorite book of the month was, and if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more videos. I do have videos coming out Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so I will see you then. Bye!